What's up, y'all? Tailwind here. So with the new competitive rule set for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet being announced, Regulation F, and now going live, I decided to collect 30 of the coolest rental teams I could find for y'all to use on the Battle Stadium ladder, complete with EV spreads in the description if you want to try them on Pokemon Showdown. I tried to get a big variety of teams as well as some really teams that have been successful in tournaments as well, but mainly going for a variety of Pokemon so you can try all the new options that were released in the Indigo Disc DLC. If you appreciate this video as a resource, please subscribe to the channel, and if there are any Pokemon that you didn't see in the video that you would like to in maybe a future one, please leave a comment. There's definitely a lot of new Pokemon released, a lot of combinations that definitely aren't included in this video and most people haven't even figured out yet, so I'll try to revisit this at the end of the month, basically with a new one of these videos, just because there's a couple regionals going on, so we'll definitely see a lot of competitive innovation in that respect. 5 of these teams were my own recreations of top finishing tournament teams, and the rest are from other people's public rental codes, so I have each of the team creators linked in the description below. Please check them out as well. With all that being said, let's start breaking down some of these teams and what makes them tick. So starting off, these are all Sun teams. I think that's just a good place to start off just because all the past Paradox Pokemon are able to benefit from the Sun with the photosynthesis ability. Gouging Fire definitely gets the greatest benefit, also getting the boost to its fire type attacks. Walking Wake gets the Hydro Steam boost as well as can run Flamethrower and boost that up as well. The general approach of these teams is to set up Sun and take advantage of the photosynthesis boost, the boost to fire type damage, as well as to Hydro Steam for the Walking Wake and the Gouging Fire. So basically just trying to capitalize on the Sun to boost your Paradox Beast to insane power levels. The approach is get Sun up, whether it's with the Torkoal or with the Tornadus Sunny Day, and then try and get the speed advantage with Tailwind. And once you're in position, it's really hard to handle all the damage you're outputting. You do just have to be very careful of opposing teams with Tornadus because oftentimes they will either carry Taunt or more problematically a Rain Dance. So yeah, definitely be aware that your opponent probably has some counterplay to your Sunny Day, so you have to be at least on some level capable of playing without the Sun when you're using these teams. I think the most complex of these teams though is the one in the bottom left, the team with the Iron Crown and Indeedee. Generally you're trying to get rid of any dark types with the Sun mode, specifically Walking Wake. Sunny Day Hydro Steam is really strong into Incineroar, and then basically just trying to clean up with the Iron Crown after that. I'd say Sun and Rain are generally going to be the most common weather teams this metagame. There is going to be a little bit of sand and snow in some teams, but generally, you'll see a lot more of the Sun and basically the Assorted Weather, and these are a better example of that. They don't quite fit into the Tailwind plus Weather mode that the other ones do, so they're more like generally balanced Rain teams or Sun teams. So in the top left, we have a very similar Rain team to what we'd seen in past regulations, Regulation C, Regulation D, where your primary Water Rain Sweeper is actually your Scarf Urshifu, and you're using the Rain to cover for a lot of Pokemon that would give your Steel types trouble. Usually it's a Goldango or a Kingambit, but here we've actually trying out the Archaludon, which obviously gets the boost of Electro Shot. Not having to charge up in the Rain, you're able to immediately get that boost and shoot off the Electro Shot and do a ton of damage afterwards. The next Rain team is also a hybrid of a Psychic Spam, Expanding Force Iron Crown, trying to do a ton of damage, but instead of having to have its partners deal with the Incineroar or risk a Focus Blast, you can actually have a Terra Water with Terra Blast, which is usually going to net a knockout, especially if you have Rain up against that. So it's a really cool combination. You also have a Kingdra with Focus Energy Scope Lens to get the Focus Energy up and have 100% crits, and be able to go for Draco Meteors without any drawback because you're critting through the special attack drops. In the bottom left, it is a hard Trick Room team, basically, once again, also using the Expanding Force. You'll see that pattern on a lot of these weather teams. They'll usually have a couple distinct modes that cover for when one mode is not so good. This one has the Hatterene, Expanding Force plus the Psychic Surge instead of the Iron Crown, which is definitely strong. It was the premier Expanding Force user back in the Dynamax era. We also have a Sun mode with Torkoal and Lilligant, basically able to lead a Lilligant Hisuian form and either threaten Sleep Powder or After You plus Eruption with the Torkoal, threaten insane damage off of that. And generally, you can also just lead the Indeedee Hatterene, go for Follow Me Trick Room, and then just bring in the Torkoal or the Ursaluna or the Gallade even and go for Expanding Forces plus strong attacks with the rest of your Pokemon. The Raikou Iron Leaves combination is definitely one of the more interesting one I've tried personally, but it was way more effective than I was expecting it to. So you can set up Electric Terrain to boost up your Quark Drive on the Iron Leaves as well as give you an Electric Seed. You can also give your Raging Bolt the opportunity to go for Rising Voltage in the Electric Terrain, but I think the Raikou Howl plus Electric Terrain combo on the Iron Leaves makes that Pokemon surprisingly bulky and powerful, and you can really surprise a lot of people with that combo. Move on to some Trick Room teams now. So with Trick Room, generally what you want to be doing is leading a supporting Pokemon, whether Follow Me, Intimidate, Fake Out, or just something that can KO something that would normally stop your Trick Room, like Annihilate or something like that, being able to just like Choice Scarf Final Gambit opponents. But yeah, the general approach is get Trick Room up and then sweep with your really slow, bulky sweepers. Potentially get a Trick Room up later in the game, but oftentimes you're just trying to win as fast as you can in those 5 turns of Trick Room. In the top left, we have a team created by Len VGC, who is probably the premier hard Trick Room user of the previous year of VGC, piloting Indeedee Armarouge to great success. He still has that combination. Now we have a new fold for that combo. The Power of Meteor Beam gives Armarouge the juice it needs to 1-hit KO most Incineroar. That's a really good option. We also have Araquanid, a new Trick Room Pokemon, and then Enamorus, which is a really potent Trick Room Sweeper, which is able to beat Amoonguss with Overcoat. That's definitely very important for Trick Room's teams to do. Balanced teams can also often just use an Amoonguss to stop your Trick Room, so having a Pokemon that is very proactive against that is very useful. The top right team is more of a mixed balance Trick Room team. Essentially, the focus of this team is to play with the Landorus outside of Trick Room, and then you have your setup Iron Hands and Primarina in Trick Room, and then Incineroar, Rillaboom, which are functionally really strong in or out of Trick Room. So basically, you're playing a mixed Trick Room team where it's really dependent on what your opponent's team is, where you decide to either use Trick Room or to not use it. This team in the bottom left with the Choice Band, Terranormal Explosion, Metagross, and Protect Porygon 2 is pretty funny. So a lot of the times you can lead Porygon 2 plus Metagross, go for a Protect Explosion while your opponent tries to double up into your Porygon to stop Trick Room, and just take 2 KOs and then sweep with whatever's in the back on your side. In the bottom right is a Porygon 2 Araquanid team. This was a very common and really dangerous combination in 2017, and it's back now. I don't think it's quite as powerful. I think the Z moves were definitely a huge boon for Araquanid back in the day, but it's still very strong. Porygon 2 has a cool option this metagame where it has download, and whether it gets the attack or the special attack boost, if you go for a Terrestrialization and you use Terra Blast, the move will be the higher of the 2 stats, which is basically just going to be whatever download boost. So you're always going to be hitting with a pretty strong Terra Blast on Porygon 2 because of that. Moving on to some more casual teams, I would say we have a 2 teams with Muck, Smeargle, and Flamigo. What you're trying to do is set up as many minimizes with Muck while Smeargle is still on the field. And once Smeargle goes away, Power of Alchemy will activate when Smeargle faints, stealing away Moody, and then you can just go for Protect, Minimize, just cycle that until you get a bunch of really favorable boosts, at which point you can bring in your Flamigo, copy those, get rid of the negative boost with White Herb, and then go to town with that. You also have a Screamtail, which can go for a Pair Song next to Tatsugiri on lead. You're aiming to survive with Endure on the Tatsugiri, switch out the Screamtail next turn, and then have the Dondozo in, at which point you can Protect, stall at the last turns of Pair Song on Tatsugiri. That Tatsugiri will faint in the mouth, and then Flamigo can copy all the boosts with Co-Star, and then similarly to the Muck, you just go wild with your Dondozo and your Flamigo mode. For the team in the bottom left, that's less of the case. You're definitely still going for that Muck strategy, but the Dondozo isn't there, so you can't go for that strategy. Instead, we have a very interesting Fluttermane set with Pain Split, Charm, basically trying to, again, increase the longevity of that Muck so that you can get those Co-Star boosts on the Flamigo. Also, you have the Sinistra mode, which can heal up the Muck with Hospitality, as well as basically come in and psych up Muck and get all the boosts, at which point you have an interesting combo. You can go for Curse, have your HP, but if you're at +6 with Evasion, a bunch of defensive boosts, you're unlikely to get hit super hard on that turn, so you're able to Strength Sap or Machagacha back up, and then go for Curses again, and that's just a way faster way to take knockouts than Toxic on other Muck sets. In the bottom right, we have what is literally just Kieran's team from the DLC, except it's been a bit more optimized for VGC. Dragonite not going for the Rain set, going instead for the more common Extreme Speed Terra Normal set, Politoed's Choice Specs, and then Porygon Z's Choice Scar. So very hyper offensive team. You're trying to get the screens up, but and then go way offensive with your Choice Mons. I probably wouldn't recommend it in like Master Ball tier, but it's a fun team to climb up with. You can definitely have a lot of fun with your friends that way. In the top right, I actually snuck in a actually really strong team. It's a Dondozo team that was able to get first place in a large tournament online. Basically, the focus of the team is using Power Herb Glamora with the Toxic Debris and Mortal Spin to either poison your opponents or do a ton of damage / knock them out with Power Herb Meteor Beam. You have the Ogerpon with Defiant, Covert Cloak to basically counter Incineroar with superpower. You're able to take that knockout into most of them, especially if you have Sword of Ruin boost to help you. It also gives you time to follow me Modal Spin with your Glamora, as well as just like activate that Toxic Debris eventually so that your Dondozo with Rocky Helmet is able to stall things quickly in the back while they are taking poison damage, while also taking really strong Earthquakes, Rocky Helmet Chip, and all that jazz. Slowly shifting back into some more serious teams, we have a bunch of Tailwind teams basically using Tailwind to gain the speed advantage over your opponent for 4 turns and try and win in that time, or at least chip them down to a point where you can close it out easily with your faster Pokemon. A strategy that a lot of people are using is Tailwind beat up Whimsicott plus Covert Cloak Terrakion. So if your opponent leads Fake Out, they can't Fake Out Terrakion. If you commit Terra Ghost on your Whimsicott, you're able to avoid Fake Out there and go for a beat up on your Terrakion. Neither can be Fake Outed, so you get that uncontested. And if they don't lead Fake Out, you can maybe go Protect Tailwind and then go for beat up the next turn. But overall, it's just a very potent combination at getting the Terrakion up to +4, and that's a really cool combo to go for either really powerful close combats or very powerful rock slides that can also just flinch your opponent. And if your opponent flinches at any point, they kind of just lose the Terrakion because that opens you up to get another beat up, and then the +6 rock slide is really hard to take for even the bulkiest of Pokemon if you lose a turn to getting flinched. The main point of interest on the bottom left team is the Choice Scarf, Lightning Rod, Terraflying Rhyperior. You could easily think of this as it's functioning a lot like a Landorus would in terms of the type coverage, but instead of offering Intimidate on this team, you're actually offering Lightning Rod, which is cool because Raging Bolt is one of the biggest counters to Tailwind people are currently having. So if you have the Rhyperior, which can go for really strong Earthquakes or high horsepowers against the Raging Bolt, sometimes even knock it out if you have some chip on it already, that is basically just really powerful. On the bottom right, we have a classic weak armor Armarouge team. So Primarina is going to be your main self-activation Pokemon with the Aqua Jet plus Endure. So basically you're going Aqua Jet, Endure, get your weak armor, get your weakness policy so that you're boosted up on the speed and the special attack. And then the next turn, switch out the Primarina into your Indeedee for the psychic terrain and go for an expanding force. So wrapping things up for Tailwind, we have on the top 2 basically really similar teams. Generally, you'll see a lot of Incineroar, Urshifu, Rillaboom, Raging Bolt, Tornadus teams. And then you'll see some variation of Pokemon. Sometimes you'll see a Landorus slotted in, Fluttermane, and then sometimes you'll have both of them and then one of the previous members out. But generally, this is the sort of team you're going to expect from a meta-standard Tailwind team. The general approach for these teams is to leverage the bulk of Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Raging Bolt to allow for the Tornadus, Urshifu, and Landorus to poke holes in your opponent's team. The one on the right has a Calm Mind, very bulky leftovers set on the Raging Bolt, which is pretty cool so that you can take advantage of your opponent trying to stall out turns of Tailwind with Protect to go for Calm Minds and basically punish them for that. In the bottom left, this team is pretty cool in that it features a Serperior, an Incineroar, and Clefairy to basically provide it turns to go for a Leaf Storm and get the contrary boost on that. It's interestingly a Terra Poison set. Most of the Serperior I've seen have been opting for the Terra, the Stellar Terra, basically having that neutral option into everything, as well as boosting your special attack every turn is definitely appreciated. Wasn't really able to find a Stellar Terra rental code, so I'll definitely try and include that in any future videos, but outside of that, it's a pretty standard Tailwind team. And then the last one is a very non-standard Tailwind team. It has Sandstorm Tornadus with a Excadrill with Sand Rush, Clear Amulet. You also have a Follow Me Ogerpon to additionally allow some redirection and get those Swords Dance up. So basically the goal of this team is to get the Swords Dance up, get the Sand up, and then have the Excadrill boosted up next to the Chien-Pao with Sword of Ruin active on the field to go for really strong stab options on the Excadrill, as well as Terra Stellar, Ice Spinners, and Sucker Punches on Chien. These next teams all have pretty varied forms of speed control, but generally fall into a more balanced category where they're not really aiming to get the speed control up every turn. The first team is very familiar to previous Chien-Pao Dragonite teams, except we've added a Metagross here instead of, I believe it was a Heatran in a lot of the previous teams like this. So your approach here is trying to take advantage of priority moves with the Chien-Pao Sword of Ruin, lowering the defenses of your opposing Pokemon. That isn't really any different here. You have the Metagross as your bulky steel type, which can benefit by going for the Bullet Punch. It's also cool with next to the Farigiraf. One of the main options to knock out Metagross in the metagame is Sucker Punch from Chien-Pao. So having the option to basically just stop that with the Armor Tail on the Farigiraf is very cool as well. On the top right, we have what is like kind of close to a Rain team, but does still feel closer to balance. You have Rain Dance on Torn, which is going to be beneficial to your Archaludon, going for Electroshot without having to charge a turn. Urshifu Surging Strikes, as well as increasing the accuracy of Wild Bolt Storm and Sandsear Storm, and reducing the weaknesses on Rillaboom. No longer worried about fire types as much. So this is kind of a rain team, but kind of not one where it's really situational whenever you're going to set it up. But overall, again, just trying to leverage the bulk and power of your Pokemon to overwhelm your opponents with proper positioning. This team in the bottom left, I'm pretty excited to be featuring actually. There's not a lot of Iron Boulder teams. It's actually one of the most popular Paradox Pokemon in the singles, basically Smogon OU right now. So it hasn't really been picking up usage in the VGC format. Maybe it's like one of those Pokemon that's way better in singles than it is in doubles, but I do think we're missing some potential here, so I'm glad some people are experimenting with it. On this team, the goal of the Iron Boulder is to use your Clear Amulet to basically circumvent Intimidates, as well as Swords Dance to boost up, and at that point you're just going to Terrakion coverage, but while you have a bit better speed and overall stat distribution than Terrakion, as well as having a Mighty Cleave, which is going to do a lot more than Rock Slide while not being as risky of a move as Stone Edge, and also being able to hit through Protect is definitely a big plus. You don't want to be going for all those Swords Dances and set up for the Iron Boulder just to be attacking into Protects. That's a really nice secondary effect on that move. Bottom right, we have a Stellar type Enamorous team. As mentioned for Superior, you can go for a Terra Stellar Terra Blast with Stellar with Contrary Pokemon and actually raise your attack and special attack instead of lowering them by one stage. We're going one step further by having the Thundurus to either Eerie Impulse and raise your special attack immediately, or Scary Face if you're in a speed deficit to outspeed and KO Pokemon. Or you also have a Sneasler with Upper Hand, which I was actually able to test this team, and the Enamorous mode is definitely very weak to extreme speed. It's a pretty frail Pokemon, so having something like Sneasler to proactively just like suppress those extreme speeds and other strong moves is definitely very cool. Going now into the really bulky balanced teams. These teams have all, except for the one in the bottom right, I believe won a tournament, a Grassroots IRL best of 3 tournament, so really incredible teams overall. Basically, the team in the top left is relying on Sword of Ruin to boost up the power of Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgels, Horn Leeches, the Landorus's Terra Blasts, Stomping Tantrums, and the Entei's Sacred Fires and extreme speeds to be really difficult to handle. We also have the Raging Bolt with safety goggles to handle basically teams that are trying to redirect with Amoonguss to protect their setup Pokemon. In the top right, all the supporting cast are pretty standard, but we have a Volcarona, which I think is a smart call. We're seeing a lot of Heatran. Heatran's kind of fallen off a cliff. We aren't seeing much of it at all. And Volcarona was basically the main defensive counter to it. So having the option to go for Quiver Dance, set up a couple of those with the assistance of Incineroar, Parting Shot, Intimidate, Munguss's Rage Powder, and then the Iron Hands' Fake Out. Just makes this really easy to set up and get going. Next is a team centering around Tailwind Latias with Rocky Helmet and Terra Poison. So Terra Poison Levitate is very cool because you only have a weakness to Psychic effectively unless you're playing a Mold Breaker Earthquake Pokemon, but that isn't too common in the metagame. It's just, again, one of those teams where you're trying to outposition your opponent with really strong Pokemon, Redirection, Fake Out, and just taking advantage of your knowledge of the type chart and trying to overwhelm your opponent with good positioning. The next team is very similar, except we don't have a Latias for speed control. All we have is a speed booster Energy Fluttermane, which pairs really well with the Landorus. The Icy Wind plus Earth Power or Sludge Bomb is really, really scary. Landorus has super effective damage into a lot of the metagame with that combination of attacks, so it's a really difficult lead to deal with. Wrapping up, we only have one rental on the screen. I had an odd number. What are you going to do? But this team was created by Eric Rios, one of the greatest Spanish players ever. Really, really excellent player and builder. And he has a really cool team with Gouging Fire, using it in more of a support role with Howl and Breaking Swipe to support the partners. Howl is just really effective for all the physical attacking Pokemon on the team. Landorus with a Howl is really scary. Metagross really scary because you can't clear it off with Parting Shot or Intimidate at all. So yeah, those Howls stick around. Heavy Slam on Metagross is such a heavy Pokemon. You're hitting for near max damage almost every time you're hitting that, and it's just really crazy, especially with the +1 boost and Sword of Ruin in the back if you want to switch that in. That will do it for me. If you enjoyed the videos, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if there's something that I left out, something you think is really cool in the metagame that you want to see me feature in a future one of these rental code videos, or one of the battle videos I also do in the channel with rental codes. So please subscribe if you want to check that out in the future. Leave a comment with those requests. And yeah, with all that being said, peace, y'all.